It's easy to focus on the big, splashy headlines about major financial players, but have you ever stopped to think about the sheer scale of generosity coming from individuals just like you and me all around the globe? The numbers are honestly mind-blowing.
They really are. And that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Yeah.
The world of global giving, specifically through the lens of individual philanthropy, the time and money that everyday people contribute.
Right. Our goal in this deep dive is to really, understand the measurable aspects of this generosity. We've got a fascinating recent report that gives us some incredible insights into just how much individuals are giving and in what ways.
And our primary source here is the Citi GPS Global Giving Report, the one from October 2024. It provides a really compelling economic analysis of philanthropic trends. It's quite detailed.
Yeah, it is. And one of the first things that just jumped out at me from this report is the sheer magnitude, the scale of global individual giving. When you combine the monetary donations with the economic value of volunteer time, it totals an estimated $1.3 trillion every single year.
Seriously, just let that number sink in for a moment.
It's a truly enormous sum. It really is. To put it in perspective, that $1.3 trillion breaks down into roughly $770 billion in direct monetary donations.
Okay.
And a significant $560 billion representing the economic value of the time people volunteer.
And it's not just about appreciating the size of the numbers, is it? We're also going to explore the causes that capture people's hearts and wallets,
Yeah.
and maybe even get a sense of whether this incredible outpouring of generosity could be even more impactful.
Exactly.
So this $1.3 trillion picture, let's dig a little deeper into what makes it up.
Absolutely. That total figure, as you said, it's the combination of cash donations and the economic valuation of volunteer work. What's really interesting, I think, is to think about what that represents on a larger scale.
Right.
This $1.3 trillion is equivalent to over 1% of the entire global GDP. Wow. 1% of global GDP. Hearing it framed like that really gives you a sense of its significance.
It does.
And it's also, incredibly, 6 times the total amount of official development assistance, the ODA, committed by all the OECD countries in 2023.
Yeah, 6 times. That's a powerful comparison that really shifts your perspective, doesn't it?
It totally does.
We often hear about the impact of major foundations and institutional grants. Those are certainly important. But this report really shines a light on the fact that the everyday acts of giving, the smaller stuff,
Mm-hmm.
which might not make headlines individually, they add up to a truly colossal collective impact.
So true. Okay, so when we look at where the actual dollars are coming from, which countries are leading the way in terms of these monetary donations?
Well, in absolute monetary terms, the United States stands out as the clear leader. In 2023, individuals in the U.S. contributed a remarkable $417 billion.
$417 billion. That's a really substantial portion of the global total.
It really is.
That's huge. What about other significant philanthropic hubs? I think the UK was mentioned in the report as well.
Yes, the UK is definitely a major center for philanthropy in Europe. Individuals there donated about $17.5 billion based on the report's most recent data.
Okay, $17.5 billion. Still a significant amount, though, yeah, considerably less than the US in absolute terms.
Right.
Now, just looking at the total dollars doesn't tell the whole story, does it? What happens when we consider giving relative to the size of a country's economy, like as a percentage of GDP? Does that change the picture?
It does indeed. It gives you a different perspective. When we look at individual giving as a percentage of GDP, the U.S. remains at the top. Americans gave 1.6% of their country's economic output in 2023.
Okay, still number one.
Still number one. But what's particularly noteworthy is that this is more than double the rate of the next closest country for which they had data, which was New Zealand.
Oh, interesting. New Zealand.
Yeah. So that suggests a really strong culture of individual giving in those nations, relative to their economic size.
That's a fascinating insight. So while a large economy certainly contributes a lot in raw dollars, the proportion of that wealth being given can vary quite significantly.
Exactly.
Were there any countries in the data that showed sort of lower rates of giving relative to their GDP?
The report indicates that among the 19 countries they included in their analysis, China and the Czech Republic showed lower levels of individual giving as a percentage of GDP, both under 0.1%.
Under 0.1%.
Yeah. But, and this is really important to remember, this report focused on countries with established nonprofit sectors. So lower figures here don't necessarily mean a lack of generosity in those societies overall.
Right, right. It could just reflect different cultural norms around how people give, or maybe that this type of organized giving isn't as prevalent, or or maybe just not as well documented yet.
Exactly. Data collection has its limits.
That's a crucial point to keep in mind. The data itself, has limitations in terms of global reach. Now, the report also highlighted some interesting trends in specific parts of the world, didn't it? I remember a notable increase in giving in India.
Yes, India presents a really compelling case. It now ranks as the fifth largest economy in the report's data for individual giving relative to its economic size.
Fifth largest relative to size. Wow.
And it has experienced significant growth in recent years. Between 2018 and 2023, what the report terms retail, giving by individuals in India, grew by 12%.
12% growth.
And giving from families saw an even larger increase, 15%. This demonstrates a really dynamic and, well, expanding culture of philanthropy in the country.
That really challenges the traditional idea of where philanthropic resources primarily originate, doesn't it? It's clearly not just a flow from wealthier nations to the global south anymore.
Exactly. The report underscores that the Global South is not solely a recipient of aid, but is also a significant and increasingly important contributor to organized philanthropy. This is a really vital shift in understanding global giving patterns.
Absolutely. So we've looked at who's giving the money. Now, what kinds of causes are individuals around the world most inclined to support with their donations? Where's the money going?
Okay, so based on the data from 6 of the 19 countries in the report that provided this specific breakdown, religion emerges as the largest single category globally, at least in terms of the economic value of donations.
Religion, okay.
It accounts for over 20% of the charitable dollars tracked at the level of specific causes. But this is largely influenced by giving patterns observed in the United States, where religious giving is quite high.
Ah, okay. So the U.S. figure kind of pulls the average up there. Were there any other causes that seemed to garner widespread support across different countries? Something more universal?
Yes, education stands out in that regard.
Yeah.
It's actually the largest charitable cause by economic size in countries as diverse as India and the Netherlands.
India and the Netherlands, interesting contrast.
Yeah. Globally, individual donations to education are estimated to be around $65 billion annually.
$65 billion just for education from individuals. That's a substantial amount. The report provided some context for that figure, didn't it?
It did. And it's pretty striking that $65 billion is almost 3 times the total amount that governments in lower-income countries spend on education each year.
Wow, 3 times.
Yeah. And furthermore, it represents a significant portion, about 65% of the estimated additional funding needed annually to achieve quality education for all children worldwide.
So individuals are plugging a huge gap there.
They really are. This highlights the potentially transformative role of individual donors in addressing global educational needs.
That really brings home the tangible impact of these individual contributions. What other critical areas are capturing the attention of individual donors?
Human services is another major area of focus. This is a broad category, includes organizations that provide for basic needs like food banks and housing assistance.
Right, the essentials.
Exactly. And also those that support livelihoods through job training and professional development programs. It's a consistently well-supported area across many of the countries included in the data.
Okay, makes sense. So the picture of individual generosity isn't just about financial contributions, though, is it? The report also delves into the significant value of volunteerism.
Absolutely. And this number is also huge. The report estimates the economic value of volunteer work worldwide at a staggering $560 billion annually.
$560 billion. That's almost as large as the total amount of monetary donations we were just discussing.
Pretty close, yeah. Generated simply by people giving their time and skills.
Incredible. Roughly how many people are actively involved in volunteering? Do we have a sense of that?
The report indicates that over 862 million people volunteer on a monthly basis.
862 million.
Yeah. And when you look at the total hours contributed over the course of a year, it's equivalent to approximately 61 million full-time jobs.
61 million FTEs. That's hard to even grasp.
It is. To give you a sense of scale, they compared it to the entire workforce of the fashion industry in Asia, which is the largest region for that sector globally. So, comparable scale.
That's an incredible way to visualize the scale of volunteerism. And geographically, where is the bulk of this volunteer work happening? In terms of that economic value, I mean.
The Asia and the Pacific region accounts for the largest share of the economic value of volunteer work globally.
Okay, Asia Pacific.
Interestingly, while the U.S. is the largest monetary donor, it falls into the other category when it comes to the economic value of volunteer work.
Huh. Why might that be?
Well, it might reflect different cultural norms, or perhaps just the way volunteer work is structured and valued, maybe even measured, in different regions.
Interesting. Now, the report mentions a recent decrease in the estimated value of volunteer work compared to previous calculations. What might be the reasons behind that dip?
That's a really insightful question, and the report touches on it. Earlier estimates suggested a much higher figure, equivalent to around 109 million full-time jobs being performed by volunteers globally.
Whoa, that's a big drop from 109 million to 61 million.
It is. The report suggests this recent decline could be attributable to several factors. One could be an actual decrease in the amount of volunteering taking place.
Okay.
Another could be refinements in the United Nations methodology for data collection, so maybe we're just measuring it differently or more accurately now.
Right.
Or it could be the lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, which undoubtedly restricted many in-person volunteer opportunities for a while. It's likely, some combination of these elements.
Yeah, that makes sense. A mix of factors. So while there might have been a recent dip, the overarching message is that volunteerism still represents a massive contribution.
Undeniably.
Mm.
Even with the revised estimates, the report clearly states that individuals volunteering their time continue to make a truly significant economic contribution worldwide. No question about that.
Okay, so it's clear that $1.3 trillion is a massive figure, but the report suggests, kind of intriguingly, that the total picture of individual generosity could be even larger.
That's right.
What are some of the ways this figure might be an underestimate?
There are three key reasons the report indicates that the $1.3 trillion might be, well, a conservative estimate.
Okay, what's the first?
Firstly, their calculation of monetary donations primarily focuses on formal giving, so giving to registered nonprofit organizations.
Right.
It doesn't typically capture direct giving between individuals, just person-to-person help.
Like helping out a neighbor or family.
Exactly. And a huge example of this is remittances money sent by individuals, often working abroad, to support family members back home, particularly in low and middle-income nations.
Remittances, right. That's a massive flow of money.
Huge. It reached an astounding $656 billion in 2023 alone.
$656 billion. That's almost as much as the entire formal donation figure they calculated.
Pretty much. And that's a huge flow of individual generosity that isn't fully reflected in the $770 billion figure for formal donations.
Okay, that's a really significant point. What's the second factor that might lead to an underestimation?
The second aspect relates to foundations. The report categorizes foundations as institutional giving, and therefore doesn't include their contributions in the individual giving estimate. However, many foundations, especially family foundations, are essentially driven by the philanthropic visions and decisions of individuals or families.
Yeah, they're often just vehicles for personal giving.
Precisely. So it's quite plausible that a larger portion of total philanthropic activity should really be attributed back to individual motivations and actions, even if it flows through a foundation structure.
That makes perfect sense. Foundations often serve as a vehicle for individuals or families to structure their giving. Okay, and the third reason?
The third reason is that the report primarily focuses on monetary donations and volunteer time because, well, those are the most readily and systematically measured forms of giving.
Easier to put a number on.
Exactly. But individuals also donate vast quantities of non-monetary goods, things like food, clothing, property, artwork.
In-kind donations.
Right, both directly to those in need and to charitable organizations. The economic value of these in-kind donations isn't factored into that $1.3 trillion estimate.
So when you consider direct person-to-person giving like remittances, the role of foundations really driven by individuals and the value of all those non-cash donations.
Yeah.
Yeah, the true scope of individual generosity could be substantially greater than what the headline number suggests.
Precisely. It's likely much bigger. Now, the report also draws an important distinction, which I think is worth exploring, between the quantifiable economic value of philanthropy and its broader socioeconomic value and overall impact.
Okay, let's unpack that. What's the difference there? Economic value versus socioeconomic value.
So the $1.3 trillion figure gives us a sense of the financial and economic scale, right? The inputs, basically. However, the socioeconomic value takes into account the wider range of benefits and, crucially, the ripple effects that this giving creates, the outcomes.
Okay, the impact.
Exactly. One crucial concept here is the multiplier effect. This essentially means that a well-directed $1 donation to a really effective nonprofit can generate significantly more than $1 worth of positive change in the world.
Right. It's not just one-to-one.
Not at all. It's about the catalytic impact of those resources. How far does that dollar actually go in creating good?
That's like an investment that yields a really high return, but in terms of social good rather than just financial profit.
Huh.
Can you give a concrete example of this multiplier effect in action?
Absolutely. The report references analysis from organizations like GiveWell. They rigorously evaluate the cost-effectiveness of different charitable interventions.
Yeah, they do great work.
They do. And they found that some of the most impactful charities can have multipliers as high as 16x. 16 times.
Wow, 16x.
Yeah. For instance, programs focus on preventing diseases like malaria, providing bed nets, things like that can achieve a tremendous amount of good. They save lives, prevent disabilities for a relatively small financial investment per outcome.
Incredible leverage.
Exactly. So a donation to such an organization can create many times its initial value in terms of improved health and well-being in a community.
Wow, a potential 16-fold return in social good. That really underscores the power of strategic and effective giving, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
And this multiplier effect isn't limited to just monetary donations, is it? What about the broader value of volunteerism? Does that have ripple effects too?
That's right. The socioeconomic value of volunteering goes beyond just the economic value of the hours contributed, which is what that $560 billion figure captures.
Okay.
Volunteering can also significantly enhance the skills and experience of the volunteers themselves. They learn things, they develop
Like
capabilities,
personal development.
which can, in turn, improve their own opportunities in the job market, for example.
You're right.
And, a more skilled and engaged citizenry has broader benefits for the economy and society as a whole.
True.
These are positive outcomes that aren't directly measured in the initial economic valuation of the volunteer work itself.
So the real impact of individual generosity, both time and money, is likely far more extensive and multifaceted than even that impressive $1.3 trillion figure suggests.
Exactly. It runs much deeper. And to gain an even better understanding of the practicalities and sort of the underlying philosophies of this giving, the report includes a fascinating conversation with Emily To, the president of the To Foundation.
Ah, yes. The Toe Foundation. They have a long and impactful history in the philanthropic world, right?
What were some of the key insights she shared about her experiences?
Well, Emily's journey in leading the foundation is really insightful. She took on leadership back in 1995, and she focused on bringing a level of professional rigor to their operations. She even drew parallels to running a successful business.
Interesting approach.
Yeah. And a key element she emphasized was the importance of building strong relationships with the organizations they support. She described it as trust-based giving.
Trust-based giving. I like that.
It involves having faith in the grantees to use the funds effectively and, crucially, directly asking them about their needs and priorities, rather than imposing the foundation's ideas. That sounds like a very collaborative and, frankly, respectful approach to grant making. What kind of advice did she offer for others involved in philanthropy, maybe people listening?
She stressed the importance of putting curiosity at the heart of their grant-making process, being really curious, and being open to experimentation, even if it means occasionally making mistakes or funding something that doesn't quite pan out as expected.
Being willing to fail sometimes.
Exactly. She noted that her parents, who established the foundation, actually encouraged this innovative spirit. She also highlighted the significance of building a strong network within the philanthropy community, connecting with peers.
Learning from others.
Yes. And also the need to consciously manage the separation between professional responsibilities within the foundation and family dynamics, especially in the context of a family-led organization. That can be tricky.
Oh, I bet. That's a really valuable and practical piece of advice for anyone involved in family philanthropy. She also touched upon the significant issue of generational wealth transfer, didn't she? That's a huge topic right now.
Yes. She's clearly very passionate about the crucial role that younger generations are playing and will continue to play in driving innovation within philanthropy.
Right.
She believes that younger people often have a keener awareness of current societal challenges and can advocate for more adaptable and sometimes less conventional approaches to giving new ideas.
Mesh perspectives.
Exactly. She emphasized the importance of actively involving and empowering younger generations in philanthropic endeavors to ensure the foundation's mission remains relevant and continues to evolve.
So how does the Toe Foundation actively work to engage the next generation in their work? Does she give examples?
She did. They've established clear and meaningful pathways for participation. For instance, they've outlined specific criteria for serving on the board, including requirements for consistent attendance and active engagement before formal election. So you have to show commitment.
Earn your spot, essentially.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And she also shared a compelling example of creating an innovation fund, specifically led by younger family members.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, giving them autonomy in their grant-making decisions within that fund. It fosters their direct involvement and investment in the foundation's overall mission.
That's smart. Gives them real ownership.
It does. And she also made a point of emphasizing the value of treating each generation as a vital contributor, respecting their individual perspectives rather than focusing on generational labels like millennial or Gen Z.
Treat everyone like the first generation, maybe.
Something like that, yeah. Valuing diverse perspectives on the board, regardless of age.
That sounds like a very forward-thinking and inclusive strategy for ensuring the long-term impact and relevance of the foundation.
It truly is. And it just reinforces the idea that philanthropy, whether it's these huge individual acts of generosity we've been talking about, or the work of larger foundations, it's a constantly evolving and dynamic landscape.
So as we bring this deep dive to a close, it's just incredibly clear that individual giving, as illuminated by this Citi GPS report, is far more than just a series of isolated acts of kindness. It's a powerful and massive global force.
Absolutely. We're talking about a staggering $1.3 trillion annually in measurable contributions of both time and money.
Measurable, yeah.
And as we've discussed, the true unmeasured impact is likely even more profound.
And this collective generosity plays an absolutely vital role, I mean, a truly critical role, in addressing some of the most pressing societal challenges we face around the world.
It really does. From providing crucial support for education and basic human needs, things we talked about, to fueling innovation through volunteer work and the strategic initiatives of philanthropic organizations, individuals are collectively making a truly significant difference.
So as you reflect on this deep dive, here's maybe a question to consider. Given these remarkable figures of individual generosity, this $1.3 trillion plus, what are the untapped possibilities? How can this incredible collective power be further recognized, encouraged, and maybe amplified to foster a more equitable and thriving world for everyone? Maybe take a moment to think about your own contributions, no matter how large or small they may seem, and how they fit into this vast and impactful global landscape of giving.
It's a really important question to contemplate, isn't it? And one that hopefully inspires us all to think more deeply about the power and potential of our individual and collective generosity.